Welcome back to the Church of Obelisk. Today we're going to do a offlane tier list for patch 7.32c, the TI11 patch. As some of you may know, I've broken my arm recently, about 2 weeks ago, which is why there hasn't been any new content here on the channel. My arm is now good enough that I can more or less use a mouse in the right hand. It's still pretty awkward. I'm still not well enough to actually be able to play Dota. But it's good enough to be able to make some content such as this video. This list, as all my tier lists, is based primarily around high-level pop play. So one of the biggest factors of what makes a good offlaner in today's meta is the item Wraith Pact. Wraith Pact is just a really efficient item. It has a great build-up. From Vlad's, you get Buckler and Basilius, great items to get, especially in the side lane. Blades of Attack, also great for last hitting and trading. And then it builds into this Wraith Pact, which is just an amazing teamfight item. In addition to the regular bonuses from Vlad's, the lifesteal is great, the bonus damage is great, mana regen is always useful, armor. You also have this active that reduces all incoming damage by 30%, which is just amazing and just makes you so much stronger at teamfighting, which is so important in today's meta. Of course, you can also buy Wraith Pact in other positions. But as a support, it typically takes a bit too long to get to the item. 4k gold, that's pretty hefty investment. And if you're position 1 or 2, you probably don't want to make this item because it doesn't scale well enough. There are some like mid laners that might want to buy it, like a Visage mid lane, for example, can buy it. But usually it's forced to the offlaner to build this item. So if your offlaner is suitable to building Wraith Pact, that's a big plus in the current meta. And indeed, our top 3 heroes here are all heroes that tend to rush Wraith Pact. So our first S-tier offlaner is Broodmother, who is one of the strongest offlaners at TI, at a 65% win rate, a very highly contested hero as well. And this hero is no longer just a cheese pick. Of course, you don't want to pick her first phase, but if you pick a second phase in the pub, they only really have one hero to really counterpick you. And that's not going to be good enough for the most part, because Broodmother now, this is not played as a right clicker, but rather as a aura and utility hero. So we're aiming, of course, to build Wraith Pact. We also want to get a Pipe, which just makes our spiders so much more tanky. And these two items in combination allow us to be really strong at mid-game team fighting. But before we get there, we want a lot of mana regen. So this hero uses a lot of mana with spawn spiderlings once it's level 6. So we want to go for Arcane Boots, we want to get Basilius, which we are using for Wraith Pact anyway. And then we typically also want to get a Soul Ring. This hero just uses so much mana. Then after those mana items, you go into Wraith Pact and Pipe in either order, depending on what you need more. And then you can double down on the aura stuff by building something like a mech into Guardian Greaves. You have mana boots anyway. But most of the time, people prefer to get into something like a Scythe or an AC for even more aura power. Next S-tier hero is Visage, who has been nerfed quite a bit, but is still insanely strong. Visage in side lanes is mostly played around Soul Assumption in the laning stage. So your idea is you want to team up with some sort of brawly type of position 4 hero, something like a Marcy or a Clockwork, that can sort of get in there, do damage, is decently tanky so that you have opportunities to release multiple Soul Assumptions. And also having a brawler as a +4 is great because Visage himself is not really an initiator. And of course, Visage builds into Wraith Pact. You can get a drum as a follow-up. You can get Pipe. You can get sort of BKB if you need to. It's not an essential item on Visage, but of course it's strong. You can get the Shard for some extra protection. You get the Aghanim's. You can also get like a Scythe if you really want some hard lockdown. Or like an Orchid if you want a bit of a cheaper option for some lockdown. A lot of flexible options here from Visage. The idea with Visage is just like with Broodmother, that you want to fight in the mid-game. He's a great mid-game team fight kind of hero. You want to fight with your team, push with your team, take Roshan, take objectives. And then rounding out the STS Enigma, who was very highly contested at TI, in fact, the most banned hero. And this is a very solid laner. You of course have Demonic Conversion to get that experience advantage in lane, as well as help you last hit. Then you can rush straight for the Wraith Pact and just be in good shape. You don't want to go for Blink Dagger as first item, typically, because Black Hole has a very long cooldown. So you don't want to invest too heavily into Black Hole at the start. You want to get one item before that, which is typically Wraith Pact. And then afterwards, usually you go into Blink Dagger and BKB and all that good stuff, and play around your ultimate more in the late game. Next, we have the A-Tier. These are heroes that are above par, but not necessarily broken. First up, we have Lycan, who is not a Wraith Pact builder, because, of course, you want to build a Helm of the Overlord instead. And if you have Helm of the Overlord, of course, you don't want to have a Wraith Pact on your team, because the aura, the Vlad's aura, does not stack. That's like a little bit of a drawback for the hero in the current meta, but he's just still really, really strong. He's a bit of a situational hero, right? If the game is not a good Lycan game, he can really struggle, and it's a hero that's hard to play from behind. But in good Lycan games, this hero dominates absolutely, and this is why he has a very, very high win rate, and it's just an amazing hero that hits these very sharp timings and can overrun the opposition even from the offlane. Next, we have Tidehunter, who is kind of a meta and anti-meta hero. He's a meta hero in the sense that he's a very good Wraith Pact builder. This hero does not need anything in particular. He doesn't need like a BKB or a Blink Dagger to function. So you can just go straight into Wraith Pact with only like a phase boots, maybe like a bracer and a wand, something like that. Then straight into Wraith Pact. Because Ravage is already really good out of the gate. You don't need a Blink Dagger necessarily. It helps, but you don't need it. So you just build a Wraith Pact, and then this hero is also a very good anti-meta hero, because there's a lot of Sue heroes in the meta, and Titan is really good against them. Anchor Smash keeps them in check. He's basically invulnerable to all these summons and illusions with Kraken Shell. So he just fits really well into the meta, because he's kind of like a soft counter to these very strong heroes, these SD heroes. He's counter to Lycan. He does really well against Beastmaster. So he just fits really well into the meta. He's a very solid hero. Next, we have our broken anime girl, Marcy, who is so strong that she can be played in literally every position and do well. And offline is like one of her best positions, because she actually scales kind of well thanks to Unleash. And with Sidekick, you can sort of buff up yourself and you carry, and it's very strong. So this hero does really well with a moderate amount of farm. Then we have Brewmaster, who's sort of similar to Tidehunter, does really well against a lot of these meta heroes. First of all, you can make a Wraith Pact on him. Then you also have the Dispel Magic ability from the Storm Panda, which does 1000 damage to summons and illusions. So that makes Panda a really good counter against a lot of these meta heroes. So you can dispel the spiders from Broodmother, you can dispel Enigma's Eidolons, you can dispel the wolves from Lycan, you can dispel the Quill Beast from Beastmaster, you can dispel all these illusion heroes. And thanks to the Aghanim's, now you can have permanent access to your Storm Panda, so you can always dispel those illusions and summons. Of course, Dispel Magic does not work against creep heroes, so you can't dispel Visited Familiars or like a Lone Druid Bear. But still, Brewmaster is a great anti-meta hero. Next, we have Beastmaster, who's kind of similar to Lycan, also Helm of the Overlord builder. He doesn't hit quite as sharp timings as Lycan does, and it's a bit harder to carry a game on your own as Beastmaster. But the hero is still very powerful, and compared to Lycan, he offers a bit more utility. You have that extra vision, which is a bit stronger than the scouting with wolves that Lycan provides. And of course, you have that BKB piercing ultimate, which is always amazing. Next, we have Night Stalker, another great vision hero. He's a bit of a brawler as a +3. You typically want to get a very early BKB with him. But it's a hero that just has a high tempo playstyle, gives you vision advantage, and it's just very solid. Next, we have Venomancer, who is another of these heroes that can build Wraith Pact. The hero doesn't need any particular item, so he can build Wraith Pact early on. And he's just like a strong pushing and team fighting hero. He can also split push quite well. He farms him fairly fast, and he's just really very annoying to deal with. Of course, he doesn't offer any initiation or stuns, so that needs to be provided by your +4 or your mid, probably, if you pick Venomancer. Next, we have Pudge, who is a very solid core in the current meta and probably works best in the offlane. The key that makes core Pudge strong right now is, first of all, you have Flesh Heap, which now has an active that provides damage block, which helps block all of the damage from Rot. Then, of course, we have the Aghanims, which will power up our Rot to do ridiculous amounts of damage. And that is just how you play Pudge. You play around this Aghanims, you try to get Aghanims as fast as possible, you farm that, and from then on out, it's just fight, 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 because you're just amazingly strong. Next you have Darkseer, a very solid offlaner, likes to buy these aura utility items. He's just solid, but he can be countered kind of by certain heroes, like you don't want to go up against an Oracle, for example. Next you have Slada, a very aggressive offlaner that has been buffed quite a bit recently, especially Slithering Crush has been improved. This is a hero that tends to snowball a bit. If you win your lane, you can often win your lane really, really hard and destroy the enemy carry. But if you lose your lane, you're kind of in trouble. So you only want to pick Slada if you have a strong laning pos 4 that can back you up. But if you pos 4 picked something like an Earthshaker, probably Slada is not the best idea. Riki is kind of like playing carry from the off lane. But the hero comes online quite quickly, especially with how cheap Diffu Blade is these days. So you can just get that Diffu and then be very active around the map and get a ton of kills. Kill all the enemy supports, force them to buy lots of detection, and give your team an advantage that way. Death Prophet is a solid offlaner. She's very teamfight and push oriented, so she doesn't do as well in lower level games. So you want to pick this hero either in high level games, or if you're playing with like a 5-stack who sort of know a bit how to play around Death Prophet, because nothing feels worse than not communicating with your team and then using your ultimate when your team doesn't want to fight, and then you're kind of in a really bad position. Legion Commander, very classic offlaner. Nothing wrong with her. She also does quite well against these Su and Illusion heroes, so she's pretty good. Then we've got Ven running out the A-Tier, a bit of an unorthodox offlaner. She's not a very strong laner, but if you get an Aghanims, that is very, very strong, and that's pretty much the only reason why she can be played as a core. That this 4,200 gold is kind of hard to get as a support, but as an offlaner, it's very possible, and it just gives you a huge boost to your strength. So the idea with Venge offlane is you just get this Aghanims as fast as possible. You play kind of greedy at the start. Often you have to catch up a bit from a bad laning stage. But then once you have that Aghanims, you play super aggressively and you play around a team and you try to make stuff happen. Now onto the B tier. These are heroes that are neither too strong or too weak. They're just somewhere in the middle of the pack. And the first one is going to be Dawnbreaker. Of course, a very strong hero in general, can be played in pretty much any position. As an offlane, she does alright, but her win rate is not the greatest, which is why she's in B tier. Leshrac, one of the most successful heroes at TI. Even though Seeker kind of lost with him in the finals, on the whole, Leshrac still very dominant in the tournament. But in pop games, he tends to do a little bit worse, but he's still decent. Then we have Primal Beast, another one of these meta heroes at TI, who again doesn't do quite as well in pop games. His win rate is okay, but nothing to write home about. But he's picked quite a lot, so this is why he's in B tier. Nature's Prophet, a hero that is very hard to play and only does well if you're really good on him. So this is not a hero that you just want to casually pick up. It requires a lot of dedication to become even a decent Nature's Prophet player. Bounty Hunter, a bit of an unusual core hero, but you can kind of snowball a bit if you have like a weakish enemy carry. In terms of itemization, the idea with Bounty Hunter is that you want to be fast, you want to stick on people, so like Phase Boot or with Corrosion is very strong. By like a Windlace, maybe even upgrade it to a drum, but then you need to get BKB as soon as possible, and you just want to fight, and not really farm, because you farm gold basically by killing enemy heroes with that bonus gold from track. So that's the idea with the core Bounty Hunter. Undying is more of a support hero typically, but can also work quite well as a core. So as core Undying, you can either go into more of an aura build with stuff like Wraith Pact, maybe like Guardian Greaves, things like that, or you can go more of a right clicker style, where you get like you get Phase Boots, you get Echo Saber, things like that. But either way, you're just like a very strong mid-game fighting hero. 9 has demonstrated how well even a mid-Tusk can do, and often Tusk is sort of the similar idea. You just have more items than a support Tusk, and you're just gonna play a very high-tempo game. Be active around the map and try to make kills happen. Centaur, very traditional offlaner, nothing wrong with him. Phoenix works better as a support maybe, but as an offlaner, of course, you have the advantage of having more levels, and having extra levels in Egg is very important. Underlord is kind of a weird hero in that he performs really well in low level games. Then the higher you go, the lower his win rate becomes pretty much. But then again, if you go into pro games, he also does fairly well. We have this coordination where you can play around your Fiend's Gate. So I would pick this hero only if you're like a low-level player, or if you're playing with a 5-stack where people know how to play around Fiend's Gate. Tiny is just solid in the offlane, nothing wrong with him. Razor, mostly a counter-pick hero, is really good against certain kinds of carries, like Lifestealer, for example. Ango, probably better as a mid laner, but he can also make him work in the offlane. The problem is just that he's not a very strong laner. OD is kind of a weird hero that he's mostly played as a right-clicker these days. You're going to play mostly around your Cane Orb, and you have then sort of secondary impact with like Sandy's Eclipse and Astral Imprisonment and so on. So it's like a hybrid between DPS and utility. Spirit Breaker, we've seen even a mid Spirit Breaker played by 9, and offlane Spirit Breaker of course can also work. Nothing wrong with him, he just doesn't scale it well and is not really a Wraith Pact buyer. Silencer, kind of a similar deal to OD. As an offlaner, you play him around your right clicks, but also around, of course, you have the Global Silence utility. You do a lot of just damage with your abilities, and you're sort of a hybrid between DPS and utility. Weaver is kind of a bit of a strange position in POS 3, where on the one hand you might want to play around utility stuff, get something like an Aghanim's, but maybe you also want to go into some right-click stuff, kind of in a weird in-between position. Wind Ranger does a lot of single-target damage. Problem with her, she just needs to commit really deeply for kills, and she doesn't offer much besides single-target damage and lockdown. Dragon Knight, it's just kind of meh right now. He's still like a solid hero, but nothing great about him. Earthshaker, he's a solid team fighter, obviously. You get a bit more farm as a POS 3, but I think he's probably a bit better as a support right now. And then Sand King, again, nothing particularly wrong with him. He's like a pretty solid counter to some of these meta heroes. But if you want like a tanky hero with AoE damage, why not just get like a Tide or a Pudge instead? Monkey King, probably better as a carry. You can make him work as an offlaner, but why would you? And then Magnus, he's okay. He just is not that solid anymore after a couple of nerfs. Then we're on to the C tier. These are heroes that are still situationally good. If you're really good at these heroes, or if it's like a really good game for this particular hero, you can still pick them. Otherwise, I would recommend to avoid them. First, we have Mirana, who's probably better as a support. Viper used to be a good hero, but he just was nerfed so much that now he's down here in the C tier. Axe, one of the most overpicked heroes, and he just doesn't really have a solid place in the meta. Right? In games where Axe is good, pretty much always something like a Tidehunter or like a Legion Commander is just going to do the same job as an Axe, but better. Timbersaw has some strong early timings, but it's just hard to make him work in a pub game. Games tend to go on a bit longer. So I would not recommend picking Timbersaw here. Necrophos was just nerfed a bit too much. He's no longer that strong. Mars, similar to Axe, very, very overpicked hero. He's like solid in that he offers a lot of stuff that you want out of an offlaner. But again, just like pick a Tidehunter instead. Tidehunter just does everything better than a Mars. And Mars just sort of needs like a Blink Dagger and a BKB to function. Whereas with Tidehunter, you just go Wraith Pact right away, and you know, you're just gonna be better with Tidehunter. Clockwork that works better as a support. Doom, he just doesn't really win Dota. Like if you're like a competitive team and you know how to work around him, he might be fine, but he just doesn't really offer you enough control over the game. And then Chaos Knight, just play him as a carry if you want to pick Chaos Knight. He just needs too much farm to really make him work. Then lastly, we have the D tier. These are heroes that I would absolutely recommend never picking in the offlane right now. First is Huskar, who just needs more levels. Pick him as a mid laner if you want to pick Huskar. Snapfire is a great support. I don't know why some people insist on playing her offlane. She does not work as an offlaner. Queen of Pain needs more farm. She needs to be in the mid lane if you want to play her at all, and even there she's not that great. Enchantress is hard to make work even as a support. We've seen Poppy do a really good job with her. But outside of competitive play, she's just not that great, and especially as an offlaner, just doesn't really scale well enough. Batrider, if you wanna play Batrider, play him in the mid lane if it's a really good Batrider game. Otherwise, just don't. And Bristleback, he's just been nerfed a bit too much. he doesn't really do that well. He still does fine in lower level games, but even there his win rates are not that great. So it's just not a good patch for Bristleback. And then finally Bloodseeker, like, he's not an offlaner. Pick him as a carry if you have to pick him. Alright, that is my list for the offlane in 7.32c. If I missed any hero, or you think any hero should be higher or lower on this list, please let me know in the comment section. And before you go, click on one of the tier list videos here on the screen. And always willing, I'll see you there.